Hello, everybody. Hey there. I'll give everyone a second to hop on here. But welcome to another episode of Mind Body Medicine with Dr. Ariel. Today, I'm switching it up a bit, if you can't tell by my background. I'm coming to you live from my office at the Nonprofit Network up in Danville, Virginia. And it's actually really a pretty place. If you can't tell, it's got fancy wallpaper and all. It's in an annex of the Museum of Fine Arts and History. So we have all kinds of like expensive artifacts and decorations that like we're afraid to touch. This couch is a perfect example. It's beautiful, but like I don't think I have ever sat on it because I'm afraid to break it. But anyway, switching it up a little bit. So this is the first remote broadcast of mine. I normally live in Greensboro, if y'all don't know that. So I don't have my usual show and tell of my, healing devices for today. And the talk may or may not go quite as long for the full hour, but buckle up and we will see. Okay, so I wanted to just start out with a little bit of a funny story that happened to me earlier today at the office. We were having sort of a team meeting, and in walks this guy who I've never seen before, kind of just wearing sweats or whatever. Wasn't really sure what he was there for, but he comes in, he obviously knows my colleagues. And he is just the funniest, spunkiest guy I've ever met, full of energy. And he just starts telling us all kinds of outrageous stories. Like one was his experience on a blind date from Farmers Only. That was a great one. But we're like howling laughing this whole time. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, where on earth have I seen this guy before? I guess it's a gift and a curse that I cannot forget someone's face. Even if I've seen them, like this used to happen in college a lot, right? Like if you see someone in the dining hall, or maybe you pass them a couple times on your way to class, and I have to figure out where I've seen each of those people. And it's super weird, but thank goodness this morning it came very quickly to me because I didn't have a ton of time. So as he's finally leaving, I kind of like got up the courage to chase after him a little. And I'm like, hey, before you go, can I just ask you, did you ever give a speech at the Danville Public Schools Graduate of Distinction ceremony? And he looks super puzzled because this is now like 15 years ago. And he's like, well, yeah, I did. And I was like, I was the student leader that introduced you. And he was like, what in the world? Like, of course, immediately, like without even, I think before he even said anything, we just like embraced in this huge hug as we both like made the connection. And I could really tell that like it made both of our days, but especially his, that I remembered him. He influenced me, and I, of course, recognized him 15 years later. Like, who wouldn't be flattered by that in this ever-aging world, right? But the best part about this, I think, is that one of the stories he told us actually wasn't super funny, and it wasn't happy. It was about a student of his who died, and he actually was on his way to go change into his tuxedo for the graveside service that he orchestrated for a student. And I could really, really feel like in that hug, like it was just one of those genuine good hugs, that he needed it today, and I needed to give it. So that felt really good for me. But yeah, Donald basically recounted beautiful facts about the student's life and said that he was proud to have been, a father figure in his life. And I got to thinking about how so many teachers end up becoming mentors or even substitute parents at times, And I have so many friends that are teachers, and they spend their already low salaries on, their own school supplies to decorate their classrooms. They'll make extra lunch sometimes to bring for the kids that don't have any. And I've been on the phone with them as they were crying at home, feeling helpless that the child's parents seemed indifferent at best. And I witnessed the same thing in the healthcare world, And I actually hear someone downstairs that's probably from the museum, so hopefully they don't like jump up here and interrupt. But if not, I mean, I work here too. So anyway, so I got to thinking like, yeah, okay, it's very hard with children, right? No one knows how to parent, no one knows how to like the right thing to do, and I'm not even a parent, right? So even with my doctor background, like no one really has it all figured out, right? So nevertheless, though, these what we call ACE for short, adverse child experiences, are linked to just a lot of problems later in life. They are a form of trauma, and therefore you are predisposed to something like post-traumatic stress disorder. I think that is probably one of the most under-recognized conditions because people expect it. One, we learn of it in a military sense, right? So you think, okay, loud noise sounds like an explosion, triggers retreat. And that makes sense, right? But that doesn't account for if someone accidentally brushes against your leg as a female, but you've been touched inappropriately in the past, and that really triggers you. So there's so many different levels to it, and that it can cause different things, whether it's substance abuse, anxiety, depression, absenteeism, financial problems. These are all just statistics. I think humans in general are all prone to that, right? And we've all, in our own way, had adverse child experiences, right? Who hasn't? Some more than others, of course. And this is a topic I've never broached in general, just because, for a lot of reasons, one of which I'm not a mother. And so I do not want to seem like I'm preachy or anything like that. But I have studied this significantly. And my sort of subspecialty was child and adolescent psychiatry. And so this fascinated me when a friend of mine sort of introduced me to the concept. And so I am going to bring on an old friend of mine, Miss Julia, who has studied the gentle parenting philosophy much more extensively than even I have. But I just wanted to like preface it with wise words from her because it is kind of a radical concept, and it almost seems counterintuitive at times too, if that makes any sense. But she said a lot of people think gentle parenting means like permissiveness or lazy passive parenting. And she wanted to emphasize that really can't be further from the truth. It's actually much more difficult to do it gently and to take the time to focus on understanding and relationship and teaching as opposed to our knee-jerk reaction, which, let's be honest, for most of us, just be like, no, don't do that. Maybe swat them, So it's definitely an alternate approach, but it is a completely new age way of thinking that will literally transform the world. You're not going to see people being bullied. You're going to see higher success rates. You're going to see a more loving, accepting society, and of course, world peace. Shameless plug. But yeah, so we will have her on in a later episode if people like this, if it resonates. And she would be a fun one, I think, to almost role play with, like me, because I like to play devil's advocate too, because I enjoy hearing the different perspectives, right? How else do we learn? Changing your mind is not a bad thing. It just means that you learn better. So anyway, to start out with, babies are born already knowing how to process and move through their emotions, believe it or not. They innately know if they need to cry, if they need to stir, if they need to scream, if they thrash. But when that period is over, usually when the need is addressed, they return to a state of regulation. I think the adults and a lot of parenting experts, not myself, I think would agree that the problem is with the adults in the sense that we've lost touch with our emotions. We've forgotten how to feel things properly. We're in this society that is so go, go, go. And if you're not like going, let's say you take the bus to work and it's 20 minutes. You're still not just sitting meditating. You're on your phone. Maybe you're reading a book. I admire you if that's the case. Doing something a little more worthwhile than scrolling, although we're all guilty. But we have forgotten how to feel ourselves, and that translates into our children. It's kind of a generational, I don't want to say mistake, but it's just a tendency. Like it's kind of just the way things are. And how we are raised determines then, of course, like I said, our kids. And so it's kind of, my friend Julia's perspective is like, it is our turn now to like reverse these toxic patterns, and that have in the past been a little more normalized or minimized at least. And I wanted to share a quote to kind of segue. So, when little people are overwhelmed by big emotions, it is our job to share our calm, not join their chaos, right? And so this is a high degree of self-control, especially if you've ever been around a screaming toddler. I used to be a nanny for years, and thank God I somehow had like miraculously decent kids, but even they have, tantrums. And yeah, it's great birth control. But anyway, I'm going to go back to my main caption. Yeah, I got it. Okay. But yeah, so I saw like a TikTok this morning, and that's kind of what got me, or actually it was a Facebook, who knows? Every social media is the same to me these days. I don't even have a TikTok, but that's kind of what got me, started here and thinking. And I'm just now checking in the comments. Sorry, it showed me like no one was on, and then like 5 people were on. Okay. Hey, Rebecca. Aw, thank you. We did our little holiday cards today at the Nonprofit Network. So like I did all my makeup, and I've got like bows on my ears and literal bells. Like I felt like a dog the whole day. I was like, this sounds ridiculous. But the best part is that I wore green Chuck Taylors with it. So we've got a cool workflow. Yes, and Courtney too. Hello. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the TikTok and the articles that I was kind of perusing this morning. And it was kind of just 5 like very shocking new ways to think about something for me too. Even as someone who considers myself huge-hearted and gentle and nurturing and stuff, it was like, huh. So the first one, maybe a child isn't clingy because they're needy. Maybe it's just that their love language is quality time or physical touch. And if you haven't read the love languages, you don't even necessarily have to read the book, to be honest. I have never read it. I know the concept, and I know what each love language is, and it's pretty easy to figure out which yours is. So this is kind of using that in a framework of how our child is behaving. But the interesting thing for me is that I'm going to take this then and use this nurturing of children to talk about how we're going to nurture ourselves. So bear with me here, because the way we talk to our children matters. That becomes their inner voice, and our inner voice is one that we need to cultivate to be kind and loving to ourselves too. So the second one, maybe a child doesn't like getting rid of any toys and can't choose what to clear out because their love language is gift giving. That like pulled my heartstrings so hard. It's like, no, I can't get rid of these because my nanny gave this to me. My grandpa gave this to me. Like I used to keep, like birthday and Christmas cards. And then you realize like you just get so many. You're like, this is just not really so many. Like I'm so popular. I'm just 31. I've had a lot of birthdays. But yeah, I used to collect them just for sentimental value because I liked knowing that people thought of me. Number 3. Maybe a child isn't asking you to grab their cup that they can reach themselves because they're lazy. Maybe it's just that their love language is acts of service. And then the last one is maybe a child isn't asking you for the 10th time, look what I can do, because they want your attention. But maybe their love language is words of affirmation. All they want to know is that you think that's great. I mean, I think so many parents can be guilty of this. If a kid's like, look at this. And we know if our child needs words of affirmation. And so we know that they're not even looking for us to go in there with them or really go and look, it's like a glance, but you focus on them and you say, wow, that is so great. Or you might ask them a question about it. Tell me about how you made that. But you don't have to completely stop what you're doing, like, it might seem. Another example is my husband, Adam. He has these 2 girls that might as well be like his nieces. And Rose, the 4-year-old, loves to play in her toy room with dolls, but she doesn't necessarily want Pep, which is what she calls him. She doesn't necessarily want Pep to play with the dolls. but he can ask questions and he can sit in there on his phone, but she just wants quality time with him. She just wants to be around him. And it's the sweetest, most precious thing. And so, yes, Adam could be annoyed and like, oh gosh, I'm just supposed to sit in this room, but he knows that she wants that connection with him. And it's really sweet. So yeah, I think that's just a really great reminder that children are learning how to be people. There's nothing harder than humaning, right? And I think sometimes we forget that they're also learning what makes them feel the most loved, right? So your kid sort of has to have every type of tantrum to kind of figure out, and you'll probably have to go through that. It's normal. But just taking note and being aware of the dynamics of your interactions and all of that. Um, let's see. So I guess I might as well start with just one of the most controversial topics because why not? Spanking, right? So I'll start by saying I'm not here to judge anybody. Like for if you want to swat your kids, if you sometimes lose your cool. I mean, I know that can be a struggle, right? And full disclosure, like I said, I'm not a parent, but there's really interesting research behind it that even sort of swayed my mind because my husband and I used to talk, and I was like, well, no, of course, I don't believe in like beating your children, but like I'm gonna swat them, like if they, if they're doing something really bad, really dangerous, things like that. And but he was still like, no. And I was just like, man, okay, all right, I gotta jump to his level. But so yeah, just using that as kind of the easiest example of gentle versus not gentle for simplicity's sake. And just really spreading awareness of like this new way of parenting. It's kind of a movement, really, and it seems revolutionary, even though it's actually like the most instinctively natural way of problem solving. Like baby cries, they need to be held, whatever they're crying out for. But since we're going into the topic of spanking, I wanted to show that I do understand. The funny thing about kids is they are the reason we lose it, and they're the reason we hold it together. So I think that's the best duality of parenting ever, right? And no one gets it perfect. But this was something that personally fascinated me. Just with an open heart and mind, I kind of wanted to delve into that duality a little bit and why, like, medically and psychologically, after doing my research, mind you, I was before not a fan, again, like nothing crazy by my standards, but like a simple like one of those on the tushy. I mean, that sounded really loud though. Like this is amplified. There's vaulted ceilings, so bad example. Sounds like a drum. But I too am slowly modifying like my expectations for myself as a parent, and that's kind of scary and daunting, right? So let's go back to my caption. Yes. And so basically, this was the thing that jarred me the most, and I don't think there's really a trigger warning here, but it's just a controversial opinion, and I've expressed them before, and I will do it again. But basically, and this too is from social media. Okay, I didn't write this, but I liked it. So basically, it says, first step towards ending rape culture: stop spanking your kids and teaching them that their bodies are someone else's property. First step towards ending bullies in school: stop spanking your kids and teaching them that some problems are only solved with violence and that the bigger and stronger are allowed to violate the smaller and weaker. The first step toward less mental illness and addictions: stop spanking your kids and putting them in fight or flight mode and changing their brains with stress instead of tapping in to their learning centers with logic and reasoning. Their brains are primed for understanding and empathy if you give them the chance. And so the same friend, I think this was Julia, who will come on a later episode. Why am I so annoying and constantly posting about this topic? Because we could change the world. She's got a little like period clap thing. I don't know. I haven't got it all figured out yet. But basically, it's just kind of putting our own egos and anger aside and trying to do what's best for our kids and our future. But no one's perfect. I haven't even started, and I already know I'm going to mess up a bazillion times. But this is definitely food for thought, right? We're trying to create a new way of thinking because the way that we've been doing for the past several centuries has just not been good, y'all, right? And then there's this whole like tough love concept. I think that's another very common one. Yes, we will change the world, Rebecca. Absolutely. The ones who think that, what is it? The ones who are crazy enough to think that they will change the world are the ones that actually do. Oh, I like that. So yeah, going back to tough love, right? Everybody's heard that. And I do think there is a place for it to an extent. Um, I'll give you a good example and a bad example. Good example is like my friend pining over her ex from 10 years ago. Like that's when you have to be like, come on, come like girl, wash your face, like we talked about in the other episode. On the other hand, my father telling me after a month of losing my mother to pull myself together and get over it, not appropriate tough love, right? So there can be both. But basically, people are refusing often to be a safe haven for their children on the basis of the real world won't coddle them. Bullshit. Of course it won't. Of course it won't. That's why they need to learn what love looks like so that they can recognize when they're being treated badly. Seems revolutionary, but yeah. Basically, the idea is don't normalize pain and disappointment. Like the number of times I was called like a baby or a drama queen while I was like sobbing in response to genuine trauma would alarm you. And that's not to say I wasn't dramatic. Every teenager is dramatic. That's neither here nor there. I'm talking like legit stuff, you know? And so the effect of that though, now, to this day, I have trouble crying in front of my husband. You can ask him the number of times I've broken down sobbing and it's less than 5. Like truly ugly cry, even though I felt like that. I'm a Heidi crier and I like go in closets or like in the bathtub or something. But it's weird. I have a genuine fear of crying in front of others because I was tormented over it by my own like father and stepmother, you know, and that's not a healthy way to be. And just think of how it is with little boys who, if they cry, it's like you're weak or you're girly. It's like, come on, you're fine, brush it off. And that's again okay to an extent, but teaching a child that, you know, boys don't cry, it's just a maladaptive strategy to raise a decent human being, in my opinion. And Rebecca, yeah, she said, I wish my parents could have heard you 34 years ago. Yeah, preaching to the choir. I wish, yeah, it's a whole bag of worms, right? When you think about it. But yeah, and then there's a part of compassion that comes, or not compassion that comes, but I guess when you are a parent yourself, right, you start to be like, oh, okay, I have a little more to identify with. But right now I'm still in the full on like this your fault category. But let's see. But yeah, basically in response to being called drama queen, whatever, like I don't think our generation is dramatic at all. I think that we've realized a lot of what we normalized growing up was toxic and humiliating, and we've just chosen not to repeat it. And I genuinely think that attitude is, first of all, way more prevalent among like our generation. Like I'm guessing like the millennials, the ones that are like beginning to marry and have kids. But it's so common. Like I didn't even realize that Julia was this like practically an expert in gentle parenting until I like started like following her on Facebook, and we go way back to high school. But and then I see on her posts that other friends of ours and other people are all like, yeah, we're gonna change the world, gentle parenting movement. And it was incredible that I was like, wow, it's like all of us are suddenly seeing the light of like, hey, we all have a shared trauma. Like we all, if you really talk to people, I mean, really have deep conversations where you're both vulnerable, you will learn so much about how much trauma there exists in the world and how different everybody's is, right? There is no comparing it, but it's just out there and we all have it to an extent. Some have the full-on PTSD like I do, and I'm still struggling with it, but it's a work in progress, right? And I think as as traumatized children, we always dreamed someone would come and save us, right? And this is another little thing I saw on Facebook, but we never dreamed that it would, in fact, be ourselves as adults. And so this is where I'm talking about translating sort of from you as a child to you as a parent, and then you viewing your parent as a child. Hear me out. I don't know if I made it sound as super clear, but basically the relationship with our inner child, with ourself, can be compared to a parent and a child, right? I lost my mom at 17. I cut myself off from my father and his wife. So I learned how to parent myself. Like, that's pretty much what I did most of the time. I had a lot of great mentors, and I remembered, a lot of what my mom did get to teach me for the 17 years I was lucky to have her. But I didn't always have it right, because it really is hard to be a parent, most of all to yourself. But I got the good grades. I became the doctor, only to realize that I was kind of emotionally bankrupt, because I was giving so much of my time and my energy to others that, like, I had none left for myself and my close circles and the relationships that I really needed to be nurturing, including the relationship with myself. My PTSD has latency by like 13 years. I mean, basically, like, at the loss of my mother is kind of when things changed, but I educated myself and achieved as a coping mechanism. So until I quit residency when I was like 28, yeah, like 3 years ago, I didn't process any of this. So yeah, it was a lot. But it took me about 3 years till like the year I met Adam, to figure out what the heck to do with myself after, putting myself out of my misery in corporate healthcare. There were no longer like rules, because in medicine, it's like you go to high school, you go to college, you go to medical school, you do an internship, you do a residency, you might do a fellowship, and you could be a doctor and learning until the day you die. I mean, so that's kind of what was my plan, I think. And then I just realized, no, it wasn't realistic. So I spent about the first year or so, like, in the beginning, I was really happy, right? You have this newfound freedom, and I'm going to visit all my old people, and I'm living my best life. But then once that got old, I kind of spent a lot of time just wallowing, like, in self-pity, thinking, what if I made a mistake? What if I did ruin my career like my father proclaimed? I wasted time with the wrong men, and drinking almost every single night, and spending the days watching Netflix, feeling absolutely no other reason to live than for my cat Nyla. Yeah. So basically, depression consumed me at that point. I was in the worst rut of my life. And I was suicidal until I really reformulated my support network. And that began with my relationship with myself and that parent voice, because I lost it, so early on. And we all think we're grown at 17, but oh boy, there are so many times I'm like, oh my God, I wish I knew that. Or like, why isn't she here to ask? Just all that fun stuff. But the friendships that I thought I had were actually pretty shallow. And most people disappeared when things got tough for me. But the struggle of healing my mental health helps show who's in your corner. And so I think that information itself is invaluable. Like, who is going to co-parent you with you, if you will? Can I say you anymore? Who's going to be in your corner constantly, like, with that positive, encouraging, uplifting voice? You don't need, the toxicity, or thankfully your friends, like, don't tend to spank you. Although sometimes my friend Jackie and I will, like, play wrestle if we get real annoyed with each other. But yeah, I just wanted to encourage you, like, finding your voice to yourself, and by translation, maybe to your children or even your relationships around you, and then finding those relationships that center that. So, like, if you want to be a gentle parent, join a mom or dad's group for just that. Like, when I was doing some of my own research, I came across a ton of, like, private groups on Facebook, much to my dismay, because I wanted to like get some good nuggets of knowledge for y'all. But just with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people um, connecting with each other, and those are going to be your tribe, right? You don't want the people who roll their eyes when you're in the checkout line and your child is doing something bad or not listening, in someone else's view of what may or may not be going on, right? Um, and just, yeah, making sure you're surrounding yourself with friends that do that for you and parents that help you support that for your kids. Same goes for like the schools that you're picking, just to the best that you can. And maybe the support network that you had feels broken. Mine did for a while. Just try to mend it, try to reconnect. Or maybe, who knows, you could have felt completely alone and like you've never had a single person you could count on in your whole entire life. I've been that too for quite a while. But find your tribe, and PRN is a really great place to start. And I'm just checking in. Rebecca, reading. It's helpful to realize you're not alone. Yeah. Hello, Jeremy. Jeremy Almanza. I'm not sure. I don't know. Are you a doctor as well? What kind? We got a lot of us, apparently. But Rebecca, yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. You definitely, yeah, you have to cultivate that on your own. But yeah, kind of going back to that for ourselves and our children, right? At the same time, I definitely want to encourage you to try to foster and nurture that understanding of our parents. From first of all, beginning with just the basic facts, right? They're from a very different, no social media, significantly less woke generation, right? And so half of it, maybe they didn't know better, right? And gentle parenting is hard. And as easy as it is, to blame our parents for all our problems. First of all, a lot of it can be, but I had a realization during my first ever sibling therapy with my older brother. And his therapist begun by saying, I'll skip the funny part. Saying our parents can only give to us what they received from their parents. My father lost his parents at 19, both of them within 6 months from each other, and then his house got robbed from all the Christmas presents that they had already gotten him. He's seen some tough times. He was also 20 years younger than his older brother and was like an oops baby, or however we joke about it these days. And so he was an only child. And that was probably a very lonely, existence. And his parents were aging and not as enthusiastic, right? And so basically, it's like a tiger in a cage, if you think about it. On the outside, they're ferocious and growling, showing teeth and their hair on end. But deep down, what emotion are they feeling? Fear. They're feeling fear. And so, as aggressive as they may act, deep down, they're afraid. They might be afraid of losing you, of not loving you right, of whatever. I mean, I guess a healthy example that comes to mind for me is I think the only time that my father did spank me. My brothers got plenty, but me was during a hotel fire, and basically middle of the night, 2 a.m. the alarm goes off, smoke, everything, and like it turned out, I think, just to be something small and electrical, but we had to evacuate, and my little 7-year-old self was sleeping, and I was like, no, I'm not going outside right now. Like, it's the middle of winter, and my dad just like whop, right on the button. I was awake. But it was for a reason. He needed to protect me, and it kind of, and I saw the reason. And surprisingly, this is also a first and an only in his life. He apologized when we got outside, and he realized everything was okay. And he apologized because I think he saw how hurt I was by that, not physically, just like stunned, you know? And so these two realizations can at least help us to begin, and I say begin because I'm not even there. Begin to forgive and like get through those emotions towards them, because that also is going to be what gives us the peace. You cannot be angry forever. Trust me, I've tried. So the bottom line is this, right? People at all times are doing one of two things. They're either showing love or they're crying out for it. And of course, there is that tricky balance, right, between empathy and forgiveness versus feeling taken advantage of, or even worse, abused, right? Um, so you can have compassion for someone suffering, but still hold them accountable for the harm that they caused, right? And to your standard now of respecting those boundaries. There's a lot that changes when the parent child dynamic switches, right? Like obviously parent child when they're young is obvious, and then eventually they're sort of equal, like friends. And then what happens? The child starts kind of taking care of the parent, and it's a weird dynamic, like psychologically, the things that go on during that, but it can create a lot of friction as well. When that was a huge source actually of my father and I's last discussion. The reason that it was is that I said, with all due respect, I've made my decision. I'm going to leave, the hospital, and I don't need a parent right now. I need support from you. And that was pretty much his ticket to just sign, steal, and deliver and peace out, I guess. Who knows? But there's probably a reason. But their pain is not an excuse to inflict pain on you, right? So we're not suggesting everybody be a doormat or anything like that. All right. So that comes to another little quote. I love quotes. But just sort of summarizing, because this is a crazy deep topic. Could be encyclopedias about this. But basically, don't gaslight yourself. Like if you were frequently invalidated and dismissed growing up, you probably learned to second guess yourself and deny your own reality. That is like the gaslighter's objective. So just never minimize or deny your truth. Listen to yourself, listen to your gut instinct. People don't get opinions on your trauma, right? Even the psychiatrists can misdiagnose it sometimes. So yeah, just keeping that in mind. And then I'll wrap up with just a few 7 emotion coaching phrases kind of that you can use when your child is upset, but really when yourself is upset. Like completely everything that is applied to gentle parenting is like self-love too. Because that's what we needed as kids. Like Rebecca said, like we wish that our parents had heard this because we'd probably be going through a lot less now, right? So yeah, just some examples, and I'll check back in on the chat. Let's see. Oh, Jeremy, I just got what you meant. Okay, so you weren't saying that you were also a doctor, but you're saying you were okay, yeah, as a patient. But yeah, hopefully when I'm at PRN, I try to make it up around once a month, but this past month I got married and stuff, so I didn't make it. But yeah, I'd love to meet you there. I'm sorry that you were a patient for 7 years though. I'm guessing you weren't in the hospital that whole time. So let me stop. Anyway, so just 7 really good phrases, like when a tantrum is imminent or something, like with yourself. If you're like, I'm about to lose it, I'm about to have a nervous break, whatever. First, it's okay to be upset. It's good to let it out. And we're going to do this referring to a child, but just apply to self. Okay. So by doing this, you're acknowledging how the child feels, you're validating that feeling, and you're showing that their emotion itself, even if it's a negative emotion, isn't something to be feared, isn't something to be avoided, and most definitely is not something to be ashamed of, right? So let it out. Like it can be as simple as that. And I have completely let it out by going in a closet at the hospital and crying. I have screamed into a pillow in a call room at the hospital. I have kicked a hole in a wall, not in the hospital. That was when I was 15 in my mama's house. So I've never destroyed professional property. But I mean, there are different ways, but however you need to. And sometimes it changes, right? Sometimes you need to cry, but sometimes you just need to scream. Another one I love is push ups. Push ups are really hard to do. So if I like get down to do 10, like I'm going to get some aggression out. Another thing you can say, number two, I hear you. I'm here for you. I'll stay with you. So staying with yourself or that child, staying with that emotion. And the best gift that you can give to yourself or someone else is to just sit with them, love them through it, hold that emotion with them, and just keep it there. Just hold that space physically, literally sometimes. You just sit there. I watched a really sweet one of those warm and fuzzy, clips on YouTube, and it's a father with his toddler, and she is just having like a record-breaking tantrum. Like I've never seen anything like it. I was impressed. She deserves a medal. But she's on the floor of her bedroom by the closet door, and he's just sitting. And she goes from screaming and crying and, banging on the floor to hitting him with the door and punching him, whatever. And the entire time, he's just sitting there. She's here. And he's just kind of holding space for her, gently sort of moving, but just holding that space and not reacting. And within a matter of seconds, she just sort of realized it was okay. And this is much different than the self-soothe where like a parent just leaves a baby crying in a crib for the entire night because they need to self-soothe, right? It's different. But just being there, and they can learn to self-soothe in a safe way where they know you're still there. They know they can still get food and comfort and love if they need to, but right now they need to be mad and they need you to hold their space and let them know you'll still be there when it's done. And that was just the sweetest thing. And let's see. And the third would be it's okay to feel how you feel, but it's not okay to fill in the blank. So this again, with a child, it's something like, say, hitting. Okay, it's not the emotion that needs to change. They can be angry, and that's okay. But it is not okay to hit when we're angry. So I will not let you hit. For us, at PRN, people recovering from trauma, substance use, any number of things from being human, we should tell ourselves to sort of stick to what we know keeps us healthy and avoid the things that don't, right? If I am a drinker, I'm going to say it's okay to feel depressed, but it's not okay to go to the bar, right? It's okay to, if I have self-harm, it's okay to hurt inside. It's not okay to harm your body outside, right? And so teaching you can feel this way, but protect yourself overall, because when you don't feel this way anymore, and it will happen, you're going to regret it, right? So taking a break when we're angry, like literally just walking away for a moment, is a really great way to regulate anger. And teaching your kids too to give themselves space and breathe and get that perspective back. And then, kind of like I said before, reminding them that how they feel won't last forever. And it's okay how to feel like that. And it's not permanent. Like that's a quote from Mr. Rogers. I think he was giving like a discussion about grief, and he said, sadness isn't forever. The darkness does not last forever. The sun always comes. And if in that moment you or your child feels and acts as if their entire world is ending, I know I can be guilty of that for sure. I catastrophize, so bad sometimes. I've gotten a lot better, but like, oh my gosh, it was bad. And basically their emotions are huge and they're overpowering. Adults, we have enough trouble with it, right? And we're like 10 times their size. Um, and they feel they never feel better again. And you have to just remind them that they're going to. And it's not the worst day ever, although that's probably not the best approach. Like, this is the worst day ever. I promise it's not, it gets worse. Would that be cruel? Um, but yes, it's basically time to take a breath, sit down, pause for a minute. That's the fifth example. One of my favorite stories about the little girl that I nannied for, Zoe. Um, she's like 2.5 when I started, and she had just ever like pretty much the most normal tantrum response like I've ever seen, or tantrum. She didn't even have them, but like she got a little flustered, like if something frustrated her, if she was trying to do something with her hands that didn't quite fit together right, she'd get really, really flustered. I think a lot of us feel that internally too. And we just say, "Hey, Zoe," we might just gently touch her hand, "Take a breath." And she'd go, "Thanks," with an F. Thanks. It's like the cutest little thing. And it works. And like it even works on us. You wouldn't believe it, but every time that I'm feeling stressed, I force myself, and I say force because usually the more stressed you are, the less you want to just pause and take a breath. But 3 full breaths, in through the nose, out through the mouth, and exhale longer than the inhale. It forces you back into that calm parasympathetic state where you can just chill back out. And then just reassuring yourself and your kids and all the emotions involved that they're all good and kind. Having fluctuations is not being bad. Being angry or frustrated is not being bad. But sometimes when we're emotional, right, we don't see clearly. Logic and reasoning and emotion have a hard time coexisting sometimes. But letting them know they're good and kind and that I'll be over here when you need me. And I think that's a really special wording too, saying when you need me, not if you need me, you can call. I like saying, "Hey, I know that you'll need me eventually, and I can't wait to be here for you," right? And so let's see. Oh yeah, well, the last part is like debriefing, but I think that's a little technical. Like, what did we learn from this? That Ariel needs to take more deep breaths. Yeah. So anyway, that's pretty much all I had for today. I will wrap it up with some warm and fuzzies though, because who doesn't love warm and fuzzies? Feelings, not kittens. Remember, I said I'm at the office, so kittens are gone. But yeah, here is childhood milestones that we should be celebrating. The first time they hug back, when their hands are big enough to hold our whole hand and not just our finger, the first time they make us laugh intentionally, and the first time they made themselves proud. And since I brought up Zoe earlier, I'll give my favorite example that kind of encompasses all of these things at once with Zoe, although I'm sure there were not firsts for her. It was Halloween. We painted pumpkins, and her parents got home. We all hugged, and she carries them, by probably 2 fingers at that point over, and she's like, "Look at our pumpkin. It's really sunken." So this little like 3-year-old made a pun and was very proud of herself, hugged our little 2 fingers, and gave hugs. So yeah, she did all those things. But yeah, just a reminder to focus on how things make you feel and not the birth weight and percentile and all the statistical things. Not that that doesn't matter. But anyway, yeah, my husband just walked in the office to scoop me up. So thank you all for tuning in. You can catch me every first and third Monday and Thursday of the month. So I will be on this coming Monday. This is kind of a wonky month in that way. But yeah, so I'll be on Monday. And again, as I said, later on, we'll bring on Julia as a special guest if we want to revisit this topic in a little more depth of a conversation. As always, I will check back in with these comments and respond to you all. Thank you so much for tuning in. Love to you all, and take care. Be well.